Hello, my soul-seeking friends. It's Shanna. Thank you so much for listening to Sense of Soul podcast. Enlightening conversations with like-minded souls from around the world, sharing their journey of finding their light within, turning pain into purpose, and awakening to their true sense of soul. If you like what you hear, show me some love and rate, like, and subscribe. And consider becoming a Sense of Soul Patreon member, where you will get ad-free episodes, monthly circles, and much more. Now go grab your coffee, open your mind, heart, and soul. It's time to awaken. Today on Sense of Soul, we have Letao Wang. He's an accomplished astrologist and tarot specialist. He is the founder and spiritual counselor of Healing Kingdom. He has served clients both in his local city of Hong Kong and internationally, offering insights through astrology, tarot, and numerology readings. Alongside this, he pens the astrology column for the well-known Hong Kong Living Magazine. But he's joining us today to tell us about his new oracle deck, Oracle of the Mythic Heroes. It's an amazing deck that I personally have, which includes a guidebook and real-life examples from his spiritual counseling sessions and his exploration of the card's teachings, helping you to interpret and apply the hero and heroine's historical lessons to your own life. This beautiful deck moves beyond the worship of the deities, but offers a more humanistic approach to interpreting the guidance of the ancient realm. I'm excited to talk about some mythology, which I haven't done a lot of. So this is sure to be an exciting conversation.
Hi, hello, Shanna. How are you?
I'm great. How you doing?
Very good. Yeah, thank you very much for having me today.
I'm so excited to learn more, and your cards are just beautiful.
When did you get my deck?
I got him a few weeks ago. There's so much information in here. And
Oh,
so, this is kind of a divine timing for me too, because I've been studying the Gnostic Gospels for some time now and
ah,
religion. I can tell that you have a love for history.
mm. Actually,
Yeah.
it's very interesting because yeah, a lot of the mythological stories are the biblical stories. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And we do learn a lot from the religious books as well. Yeah.
That's so crazy. And I would love for you to talk more about that if you would. Through my podcast, I've learned so
Mm,
many things from so many people, but I've not had a lot of people talking about mythology.
mm.
And all of a sudden, I'm getting all of these guest requests for mythology. And I'm like, okay, this is where I'm moving into right now. I love how that is. I don't know about in your life, but synchronicity, I just follow it and it seems to always align with my journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, well,
Yeah.
the whole foundation of astrology is about synchronicity, right? Astrology is about as above, so below, as within, so without. So
Mhm.
it's basically talking about whatever that is happening in the celestial realm is synchronized with what is happening on the earth. Yeah, and that's why as human we can look at someone's chart or we can look at the position of the planet at that very moment and to
Yeah.
understand what is happening in the world.
Hey, wow. And you know what? Seems like there's something going on. It's almost as if we've moved into a higher dimension. There seems to be a lot of shifting. I
Yeah.
don't know. I almost feel like collectively,
Mm,
I don't know. I just feel like maybe before we were in 3D and
mm,
stepping into
mm.
4D in and out our day. But now
Yeah,
it
yeah.
seems like we're bumping up from that.
Yeah. Well, we do have, around, I would say, January, February-ish, we're having Pluto finally moving to Aquarius after, you
Okay.
know, 10, 15, 20 years, it's, I think about 15 years it
Oh,
spent in the Capricorn. And Pluto is going to stay in
okay.
Aquarius for the next 20 years, basically. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because
Okay.
Pluto doesn't change signs very often. And so we are seeing this very high level energy shift from one sign to another.
All
Yeah.
right.
And Pluto is all about secrecy, power struggle, deep transformation, birth and death and rebirth.
Are we in the age of Aquarius? They've
Mm,
made songs
mm.
about this
I
back
have
in
it.
the 70s. So are we finally in there? You hear people saying yes, no, maybe so.
Well, yeah, well, pretty much Pluto entering Aquarius is a big sign for us. Yeah, it's about
Oh.
the official start of the age of Aquarius, actually. And around, I think, maybe end of January, right? So usually the sun moves into Aquarius around January the 20th, 21st, around those days, sometimes the 19th, depending on the year. And so we're seeing this conjunction between Sun and Pluto. And on those days, the energy was very, very intense, actually, because the sun is about our ego, how we see ourselves, right? That's a
Mhm.
life source. And Pluto was the opposite energy, was the death, right? Because Pluto in Roman mythology
Oh.
was a god of the underworld, the darkness, the secret, the secrecy, right? The power struggle, right? So you're seeing the light and the darkness conjunct together on those days. And to me, that's the official. If we have to find a day, yeah, to say, okay,
Hmm.
now the age of Aquarius have started, I think that was a very important day. And on that day was very
Wow.
funny because
Okay.
I was looking at the sun, right? Because I knew, of course, we can't see Pluto, right? But we can see where the sun is. And I was just thinking,
Okay.
okay, so right now Pluto is right behind the sun, right? If we're looking, at the planets in one line,
Yeah.
right? The so-called two planets in
They're
conjunction,
aligned.
basically meaning that they're aligned. Yeah, and it was very weird because on that day the weather was great. It was beautiful day, but somehow I just felt there was some kind of darkness there. So you know what I mean? Like I was feeling that behind all this light that I see in the sky, there's that Pluto energy, the intense, the transformative energy with it. So it was kind of an interesting day. Yeah.
Wow. So I had an experience in my backyard. The moon and the sun were aligned.
Mm,
I didn't have to move.
mm.
I could see the sun was in the right eye and the moon was in the left eye.
Yeah,
And I did
yeah.
not
Mm,
have to move my head. And
mm,
it was a waning crescent moon. And the sun was like crowning it. And I
mm,
just so much was like, oh, like, oh my God, I
mm,
get it. Like it
mm.
has to be aligned. There can't be one without the other. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
all of a sudden, a white dove flew above my head.
Mm,
And I took a picture of it. I
mm,
was just like so flipped. When you have these moments with nature, which is
mm,
like such a teacher,
mm.
I mean, it was the most divine moment. So I understand what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, 100%, right? I mean, I think, thousands of years ago, we have already been doing all these things, right? In the old days, that's how the farmers knew when to plant the seeds, right? They will observe
Mm.
the sky and they will know, okay, now we need to do the harvesting, we need to do the planting. And, next month, we probably will have the flooding, right? So let's, fix the dam, right? And, or maybe in 2 years' time, we're going to have a solar eclipse, maybe in Leo. So we're concerned about the king's health, right? Would the king die when the solar eclipse
Wow.
happens, right? So, yeah, thousands of years. Yeah, I think as human, we have been building this very a close, intimate relationship with the sky. It's actually these days we do less, right? Because in a funny way, I think
For
humans
sure.
have become more arrogant in a way that we believe that well, the sky has
Hmm.
nothing to do with me, and I can control the sky. Like
Oh.
for example, with technology, right? Let's say, well, okay, we don't have enough
Hmm.
rain. Okay, I can make rain, right? Because I have a plane, I have technology, I have all the material.
Yeah.
But so, and I think maybe one of the things I would wish as an astrologist and a professional working in this field, I would really hope that we can rebuild this respectful relationship, between us and the sky.
Yeah, because we're so busy. We don't notice. And when I became aware in my journey,
Mm,
I mean, it was always looking up. And I
mm,
and I had this
mm,
conversation with someone recently where she had told me that most people only see in
mm,
front of them.
mm,
Like the majority of people, they don't look
mm,
up. And
mm,
we were laughing because it's the first thing I do when I go outside. And so I always see a lot of things in the sky,
mm,
whether it's
mm.
birds or like
Yeah.
I said, the experience with the moon.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And it just goes to show you how unconscious we're living.
Well, I think, for example, in schools, right? I really hope that, we could have this type of education a little bit more. When do we ever learn about, synchronicities and spirituality in school, right? We never learn about those things. No wonder we're not aware, right? And of course, our parents don't talk
Mm.
about these things. So if we
No.
grow up in an
Mm.
environment where nobody is talking about them, then we have no idea about what the
Yeah.
sky is, except for
Mhm.
knowing, oh, we're gonna shoot another rocket, to the moon or whatever. To be honest, I'm not a very big fan of shooting stuff, onto the moon, onto the Mars. Of course, in my view, might also not be very valid, but it's just my personal opinion. I feel that, there are so many problems that we need to solve on the Earth. If we have the money and
Right.
resource to shoot something onto the moon, why can't we save the sick children,
Right.
save the
Here.
Earth, right? Stop the war, right? Why can't we move our
Right.
resources into those fields rather than, we need to find some treasure on the moon. We need to
I know.
draw a
Agree.
line. This part of the moon is mine. You know what I mean? That part of the Mars is yours. That's just really
Right.
ridiculous. You can imagine
It is.
the aliens living so far away from us, right? They're watching us. They're like, look at those little people fighting over
Look at
those kind
these
of,
stupid people.
yeah, yeah, who cares? I mean, the whole Earth is a dust floating in the nowhere of the universe, and you guys are fighting over
Yeah.
whether this island is mine or not. It's just,
Right.
it's sad, right?
Yeah.
So,
It in the big picture, it's so stupid. It truly
yeah.
is. So I also was, studying one of the things I was writing recently was on Mother Mary and the story of the
Mm,
Virgin.
mm,
And, as I was learning about the stories that have been untold about Mary, which were in apocryphal text and also in the infancy text and also in the Quran, which
mm.
all tell the story of her mother, her father,
Mm, mm,
and her as a child. I thought about the perpetual virgin
mm,
and thought this is not so unique to her. It's like her story, actually, which was very unique, that was not included in the Bible,
mm,
but her being a virgin is not as unique as
mm,
people think. This has been
mm.
told over and over
Yeah.
throughout many myths.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of myths have similar figures, right? A virgin
Mhm.
woman, and then they receive some kind of I don't know, magic or instruction or whatever from the universe, and they become pregnant, right? So
Mhm.
definitely in Greek and Roman mythology, we see that a lot. Actually, most children by Zeus, to be honest,
Uh-huh.
were born, from a mother whom Zeus didn't really have physical sex with.
Right.
Either he became this shower from the sky, the water, and then the woman becomes a pregnant.
Mhm.
It's a little bit like that. So that's the,
Right.
yeah, it's quite similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the story of Sophia
Mm.
in the Gnostic Gospels, she could also be considered a virgin giving birth to the demiurge.
Mm.
So there's a lot of the stories in the Bible, I would say you can reference to the
Mm.
stories that
Mm.
I found in mythology,
Yeah, yeah.
which, is kind of a problem when one starts doing some history and,
Mm.
starts going down the paths and reading, because you're like,
Yeah.
wow, this sure does
Mm.
sound like Jesus.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I need to actually do more study about biblical studies, actually. Yeah. I haven't done
Yeah.
much. I've read some stories, but yeah, that's
Mhm.
definitely something that I like to explore in the future.
Like Dionysus, he has a very, very similar story to Jesus,
Oh,
like how he
okay.
came into the world, how he ended up dying. And yeah, the rising, it has to do with the sun.
Yeah, yeah. Dionysus, yeah, the god of wine. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he
And
was one
he's,
of the 12 Olympians. Yeah. Mm. Because his mother was not Zeus' wife, right? So when he was born, Zeus had to hide him, and Zeus' wife, Hera, was very angry with his child because she felt you had an affair with a different woman, and now the woman is giving birth to a child. I'm not gonna allow that to happen. So Dionysus was born, and was kind of like in an unfortunate way. And also he was raised as a girl because
oh,
his mother didn't want people to find out about him, right? So that's why
crazy.
when you see a lot of the ancient statues of Dionysus, he looked very androgynous. So most Greek god, they're older men, they have a beard, right? And they look quite masculine. But Dionysus is a very youthful looking, boyish man, basically. Yeah, long hair, sometimes flowers, on his head. Yeah. So that's because of his childhood.
Mm.
Yeah, it was a very funny story. Dionysus doesn't have a lot of stories in Greek mythology, but he tend to play a very supportive role. Yeah, in them. Yeah.
Did they model even the look of Jesus then? Because you know how Jesus
Mm,
has like this look,
mm,
that you were just
mm.
kind of describing. But
Yeah,
isn't it
yeah.
more common that the women would have been like Mulan or whichever Disney character was trained to look
Ah,
masculine rather
yeah,
than,
yeah, yeah.
vice versa?
Well, I think, Mulan was a, you can say that's, well, that's actual real history anyway. Mulan actually,
Is
she
it?
did,
Yeah.
she did exist, yeah, in Chinese history. And it was because of traditionally speaking, Chinese society was very, very patriarchal, especially back then, right? So
Mhm.
for a woman to dress like a man to go to the battlefield and to fight on behalf of her father and her brother was very, was a very noble deed. And so that was, I think that was
Oh.
very special, right, about it. And like, for example, I think in Western society, let's say Europe, right? I mean, many countries, they have queens,
Mhm.
right? So it doesn't really
Mhm.
matter, whether you have a boy or a girl. If you give birth to a girl, the girl eventually will become the queen for the royal family. But in Asia, like
Mhm.
China and Japan, generally speaking, females were not allowed to be the heir. You have to give
Yeah.
birth to a son, the son becomes a king. And if it's a
Mhm.
female, then eventually you will have to marry into someone else's family and take their family name. And so again,
Mm.
Mulan's existence was very inspiring, right? It was showing the strengths of femininity at that
Mhm.
time. But the interesting thing is in the Disney movie, yeah, they did a little bit change about the actual story. They added this male character who Mulan fell in love with. And I kind of feel like
Right.
that destroyed the purpose because the her whole purpose was
You're
Mulan was
right.
yeah was like a independent woman and she didn't really need to be with a guy. But the
Mhm.
whole Disney movie
Right.
was was about her. Yeah, she became a man and then she became a woman again. She became a man when she went to the
Mm.
battlefield, but when she met the guy, then her inner little girl will kind of be like, "Oh, I want to be in love with that guy." And so that's kind of
You're
funny
right.
to see that, yeah, in the Disney movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that male figure was never really in Chinese history.
Wow.
Mm, yeah.
And a lot of those stories could even be
Mm.
compared to, like, can you think of any that are, close to Greek mythology or some of those?
You mean of a female
Some of
characters?
the, fairy tales that we've grown up with that maybe
Mm.
we didn't even realize, it started,
Yeah,
long
probably
ago.
there are a lot. Yeah, I think there
Yeah.
might be a lot. Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But
Hmm.
I mean, in Greek mythology, I would say a lot of the time the gender are quite fluid.
Hmm.
There's a lot of magic and transformation, right, happening.
Okay.
So yeah, I think
Wow.
they're quite a lot.
And most of these are also, I feel like they're archetypes, right? And would you say that some of these, even many of the ones that are in your deck could also be like you could find them in other mythology, but under a different name, or even in like other
Mm,
religions, like in India,
Yeah,
Hindu.
I think, yeah, to be honest, I mean, as astrologers, right, we have to, because mythology is basically the base of astrology, or
Okay.
vice versa. And so when we study the night sky, people from different culture, we tend to find similar archetypes through the sky. Like, for example,
Yeah.
in Roman mythology, we have the goddess of love, Venus. Um, in Greek
Hmm.
mythology, we have the goddess of love, Aphrodite. And in Indian mythology,
Hmm.
we have the goddess Ishtar. And it's very interesting
Right.
because when you really study these stories, and for example, in Indian mythology, the story of Ishtar was she descended into the underworld, right? And so it was a little bit like her
Hmm.
struggle with death. And when we look at astrology, we know
Hmm.
that when Venus, the planet representing love, is forming a very harsh angle with Pluto, the planet representing the underworld, is usually showing a lot of struggle and painful experiences sometimes when it comes to dealing with relationships. Like, for example, one of my
Okay.
experience with clients is if, let's say, a client has a very tight Pluto and Venus opposition on their natal chart, sometimes their emotional life is too intense. I don't know if you know that kind of people. It's a little bit like either it's 0 or 100. I don't like 50%.
Yeah,
And that's
I
why
know
for
those.
them,
Yeah.
when they're dating, they're very extreme. It's a little bit like, even after 2 days, they're already thinking, why are you seeing other girls, right? You are not
Oh.
serious about me.
Hmm.
You're not committed. And but in this counseling session, sometimes I ask them, but only after 2 days, how do you expect someone to be committed to you and to be
Yeah.
100%? They don't even know you. And also vice versa, you don't know them either. So where is this intense emotion come from? When you feel that, oh,
Yeah.
but he's not replying to my messages, he's not talking to me. So it's a little bit like that.
Wow. You started to see similarities in this stuff as you
Well,
started to work with people and started to
mm,
read their charts.
yeah, this is also the synchronicities, right, between different
Hmm.
cultures and different mythology. And also because my background is Chinese, so we study
Hmm.
Chinese astrology as well. And you
Mm.
can also see the similarities between Chinese astrology and modern Western astrology, sometimes also with Vedic astrology. Yeah.
Wow. Don't you love that? How they all just kind of fit together if you compare them to? Because I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I just recently learned more about, I've been kind of digging into the Chinese astrology. I had somebody on recently,
Mm,
and I was just very curious, like
mm,
probably even more curious about Chinese astrology than I've ever been about,
yeah.
Western astrology.
Mm,
And I think it was because me and my kids, we all like talked about what we were, and I
mm,
was like, God, that is so right on. And
mm,
it's the
mm,
year of the dragon. I'm a
mm.
dragon.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
I'm a fire dragon though.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm also a snake for my month.
Uh-huh.
But I have a daughter who's a dragon.
Oh wow, you have a lot of dragons at home. Yeah, this is your
My
very
mom's
important
a
year for
dragon.
your family.
My
Oh
mom's a
really?
dragon too.
Oh God. This is a very intense year for your family. A lot of this is your year, your family year. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully in a good way. I mean, isn't the
Yeah, well,
dragon luck?
mm, mm. Well, when it's your own year, right? Usually, this is what we say in Chinese astrology. When it's your own year, let's say you're a dragon and you experience a year of dragon. Yeah, this year we say that you are having a clash with the Tai Sui. And there are generally speaking four
Mm.
animal signs clashing with the Tai Sui. So dragon is one of them, and there are other three. Yeah, but there's a difference. The so-called clashing with Tai Sui. Tai Sui is a divine god from Chinese mythology, and every year it's almost like he will change his seating, right? So this year he's sitting in the seat of a dragon. Next year he will move into the seat of snake. So it's a little bit this. Imagine it's a Chinese a restaurant, right? We all have this kind of round table, and you keep changing
Yeah.
seats. It's a little bit like that. So the Tai Sui, when the
Okay.
Tai Sui is sitting in dragon, basically that means you are sitting together with Tai Sui, where Tai Sui is sitting on your head because you're a dragon now. He's on you. It's a little bit like that. And so what does that mean? It's not necessarily saying that it's bad luck. It just tells you that now all eyes are on you because you are sitting with a Tai Sui. So a lot of people will find it either stressful or they find it too much pressure. Because as human beings, I think innately we're all a little bit lazy. We don't want to take that responsibility, right? If the whole table is waiting for me to make the decision, then I don't like it. I feel I'm being pressured. I don't want to be the only one responsible. You guys should also be responsible. And so it's a little bit
Oh
like
my
that. So this
gosh.
year for dragon people, it could be a very rewarding period of time, actually, if you're willing to take the responsibility. And so that's usually when we say when it's your year,
Hmm.
what it means when you say you clash with a Tai Sui, because Tai Sui is you. You are the Tai Sui. And so everyone is
Oh,
looking at you. Yeah.
well, I can tell you so far, I've had opportunities like I have never had in my life.
Ha ha ha
And it
ha.
is moving into an uncomfortable place that I'm not
Mm,
used to, but
yeah, yeah.
I'm up for the challenge and I'm excited.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, exactly. That's how you deal with your own year. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm, mm.
Yeah, but I am a little worried about my daughter being a dragon now.
Then you need to worry too much. I mean, all her classmates are dragons too, so I don't think it's really a big deal. There are millions of 11
Right.
years old out there, right? So yeah, all eyes are on her. But
So
mm.
tell me about the muses.
Muses.
Yeah.
Well, in Greek mythology, actually, muses, they were never the main character, right, on the stage.
Okay.
They usually play a very let's say supportive role in the stories. And one of the most important
Okay.
muses actually in Greek mythology, her name is Calliope. She was you can say she's a goddess as well, yeah, but most stories would depict her as a muse, and she plays she was the goddess no sorry the muse of music and poetry, and she was also the
Oh.
mother of one of the most famous musician, Orpheus. So we see this very positive and beautiful image of muses, right, like Calliope, but we also see very interesting and negative images of muses. For example, Echo.
Mm-hmm.
Echo was a very more or less like the negative side of the muse, because she fell in love with Narcissus, but Narcissus wouldn't respond to
Oh.
her. Yeah, so the whole story about that was Echo was a little bit like a noisy person. Yeah, she talks too much, and so the goddess Hera disliked her. So Hera cursed her and said, from now on, all you can say is other people's echo. So you won't be able to say your own words. You can only repeat what other people are saying. So she was cursed, right? And because she offended the goddess Hera. And she fell in love one day. She saw Narcissus, in the bush, and she fell in love with him. But she couldn't say anything. When Narcissus said, "Who is it?" Because he heard something behind
Yeah.
him, yeah. And all Echo can say was, "Who is it?"
Always.
She was only able to repeat what Narcissus was saying. And in psychology, I actually just published an article about this with a spiritual magazine. In our daily modern day counseling, we actually see this as a sign of lacking communication. See, the fact that Echo was only able to repeat what other people saying was because she couldn't really voice her own truth. She couldn't say what she wanted to say. And that's why, the
Mm-hmm.
relationship between her and Narcissus didn't work out. And so in their daily life, it's a little bit like a couple having problems in their relationships because they couldn't communicate their truths, or they're
Mm-hmm.
very, maybe they have very self-imposed censorship on what am I supposed to convey. Am I supposed to say I want attention? Am I allowed to tell people that I need love? Or am I just being needy, right? And I don't want to sound needy, so maybe I shouldn't tell my partner that I need
Oh.
this. So when you study mythology, the essence of that is really about how you can apply that into our modern day counseling,
Yeah.
rather than, oh, that's an interesting story, finish. You know?
Because this is exactly like what
Mm.
I was saying that I've learned through my journey was
Yeah.
that there's a story within a story within a story.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think in the biblical
Yeah,
sense it's true, right? I mean, I haven't read a lot, but there's one story
true.
in the biblical sense that I was really touched by. It's a story about Job, from the
Hmm.
Bible, actually. So, sometimes a lot of people would say, maybe they're going through a difficult time, and they tend to rationalize it
Hmm.
in a way that they will say, what did I do wrong, right? What
Hmm.
did I do wrong to deserve this? I've always been a good
Right.
person. Why do I have to suffer from this? Is unfair to me, right? And this Job story was a very good explanation actually to that. Basically, the whole story about Job was the God and the devil were having a discussion. The devil was saying, well, Job has been a good man. He respects you. He worships you only because you have been nice to him, right? You gave him beautiful wife. You gave him beautiful family, beautiful children, a lot of money. That's, of course, he will worship you, right? But if you take everything away from him, he will worship me. He will say, oh, God does not work. God does not
True.
exist, right? It's been unfair to me. So yeah, do you want to bet on this? I bet I'll tell you, right? If you take everything away from Job, he will stop worshiping you and he will disrespect you. And God said, let it happen. Take whatever you want from him and let's see how he behaves. And that's what happened later. He lost his wife and he lost his home because of a big fire. He lost all his children and his money. He just became, at the age of 50 or 60, he lost everything. But still, he
Mhm.
never lost the faith. He never really cursed God. He never said, oh, the universe is unfair to me. Why do I have to suffer? And I really
Mhm.
think that Job story tells us one thing. It's about suffering. It's about human suffering, right? Suffering does not have to be
Mhm.
a result of something. Sometimes we tend to see that as a result.
Mhm.
I did this. That's why this happened. That's why I deserve this. This is happening, but I didn't do anything wrong, so I shouldn't suffer. And if I'm suffering, then I cannot reconcile that. And I think Job story is telling us that sometimes suffering is just a normal human experience. Just like when we are having a great time, We don't need to find the reason behind that. When life is going really well for us,
Mhm.
we don't have to think that, oh, what did I do well to deserve this happiness? We just enjoy the happiness. And we tend to think that, oh, I'm lucky. This is great, right? This is a good time for me, great year for me. But when things are not
Yeah.
going well, we tend to go very deep in our mind thinking, why? Well, sometimes there are reasons for sure. Sometimes there are no reasons. Sometimes suffering is just
Mhm.
a normal human experience that as a human being, we're born into this life. It's just meant to be something we have to experience and have to learn. And through that experience that we understand how we control or how we work with our inner emotion. Yeah, I think, that's a
Oh my
very
God.
interesting biblical story, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that so much.
Mm.
You are so wise.
No,
So, I
nah,
mean,
thank you.
yeah, but you know what? I mean, I'll tell you, I've
Mm,
definitely gotten wiser too, learning
mm,
about ancient wisdom. I feel like a lot of it's been hidden
mm,
for so long. And so,
mm,
one of the things I loved about what you've done here
mm,
is made a deck to be able to teach this
mm,
through also your
mm.
personal stories or
Ah,
examples, as well as the history of each of these heroes and
mm,
heroines.
mm,
And I pulled a card earlier for myself, and I just wanted to share with you what it was because I found it was very interesting. And I like to get to know each of the cards just, by pulling a
mm.
card every day.
Yeah,
So I
yeah, yeah,
pulled
yeah. Mm,
sirens. What I
mm,
found was interesting about the card that stuck out to me first. Well,
mm,
first, there's three feminine,
mm.
and I didn't know who they were at first until I read your book. But I also noticed that they have the animal feet or the goat
Yeah.
feet, or maybe it's, uh,
Eagle, yeah.
well, yeah,
Eagle
some
feet,
sort of
yeah.
goat feet. And then you
Yeah.
look at
Mm.
some of the goddesses, they'll
Mm.
show art with this
Well,
animal
actually,
feet. I forget which one. I don't know if it was Ishtar.
actually, sirens are not goddesses. They're monsters.
They're monsters. Oh
Yes.
God, you're
Mm.
kidding me.
Sirens in Greek mythology, they were monsters eating human flesh. So they were beautiful women.
Yeah, I
And
read that.
what they do, yeah, what they do is they will sing beautiful songs, right, to lure sailors in and to cause shipwreck. And once the shipwreck
Well,
happens,
that's not very good.
they will eat them. Yeah, they will. Yeah. So sirens was not, they were not goddesses. They were very vicious.
They
Yeah.
were not goddess. They're very
Yeah.
vicious.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that mean for me then? I
Huh.
pulled this
So
card.
you see the story, the card's keyword is called a cleanse, right?
I know.
See
I
the
thought that was good.
in Greek mythology, there were two very famous stories related to the sirens. The first one was Jason and the Argonauts. When Jason went on his journey, to fetch the golden fleece, on the way back, he had to pass through this area on the ocean, and that's where the sirens live. And when he approached the sirens, of course, the sirens started to sing, and all the male sailors on the boat lost their consciousness, right? Because they were basically under the magic of
Mesmerized.
siren, mesmerized, that they didn't know what they were
A
doing. They were like, oh,
spell.
such beautiful, songs, okay, let's just go there, right? And then at this very dangerous time, and one of the guys whose name was Orpheus on the boat, which I mentioned earlier, he was a son of Calliope, right? The muse of music and poetry. He came onto the deck and he said, okay, let me play a song. So he played this beautiful song with his lyre in his hands. And this beautiful music actually drowned the voices of sirens. So everyone came back to to their consciousness, and they realized, oh, okay, now we gotta walk away from this. So that was the first story, and the second story was with Odysseus. Also, during his journey, he encountered the sirens, and he told his sailors to bind him on the pillar, right? And said, do not let me move. And everyone, please put wax into your ears so that you can't hear the voice, right? So those are the two interesting stories about sirens. And when you read the story, you
Oh my
understand the reason why sometimes things are not going well is because we let the siren's voice distract us. Siren's voice is about the people
God.
around us. They're saying this, saying that, and they're using their sweet voices to allure you into something that might lead you astray. So that's why the keyword of this card is called cleanse. It tells you that sometimes it's important to listen to your own inner voice, play your own song, rather than being distracted or lured by the so-called sirens' beautiful songs. So this is up to us to judge. What are we being distracted by?
Wow. Okay, so it's the last card in your deck as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is one of the lunar creatures, the four lunar creatures. So if you look at the guidebook, there are the
Hmm.
36 first 36 chapters was about the heroes, the mortal hero stories and
Hmm.
heroines, and the final four
Okay.
chapters they are the lunar cycle creatures in Greek mythology. There are Medusa,
Okay.
sirens, and there's a Sphinx and also the divine Pegasus. Yeah. I really think that this deck could be very, very
Wow.
interesting for people who are into mythology and who also are interested in learning life lessons from storytelling.
Uh-huh. And
Mm,
I also like to see things from a different perspective. You
mm,
know what I mean? Like the fall of Sophia, right? The fallen
mm.
angel and the story of the fall of Sophia, and she falls into the darkness. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
almost like
yeah.
this damsel in distress kind of thing that is often told about
Mm,
women
mm,
to kind of shift it and make a new story, make a new
mm,
myth out
mm,
of it, and
mm.
see it in a more
Yeah, yeah,
empowering way and like
yeah,
reclaiming
yeah.
the power. I felt the same way about Lilith.
Mm, mm,
The story of Lilith.
mm.
And I actually had a conversation with a rabbi about this. He's like, you need to reclaim Lilith for the feminine. There's oftentimes
Mm,
this archetype of a feminine goddess, and
mm,
there's always this dark side. There's
mm,
always
mm,
this darkness, there's luring, and or
mm.
this even luring with sexual energy.
Mm. Yeah, everything has that, the dark side and the good side, right? I mean, even
Yeah.
in every mythological figure, we can see even the god and goddesses, to be honest. And that's why Greek mythology is so
Mhm.
fascinating because the gods, they're different from the religious god. The religious god are
Yes.
omnipotent. There's nothing bad about them. They're a god, you
Right.
100%
True.
you must respect, you
Yeah.
must bow. In Greek mythology, every god and goddesses, you can see them as a human being because there are amazing things that they do, but they can be very jealous. They can be very
Hmm.
vindictive, like Hera, right? And they can be sometimes be very arrogant. Well, Zeus sometimes very arrogant, and that's not something that we want to be. So yeah,
Right.
so that's I think that's the reason why Greek mythology is so fascinating, because even when you read the stories of the god and goddesses, it's not about them being perfect, but it's more about them. It's just exactly the same as us. And so this comes back to the
Yeah.
initial concept that we talked about, as above, so below. If we as human beings live this way, this is how we naturally behave. And that's how we sometimes being, let's say, selfless and sometimes selfish. Then in the sky, there's
Mhm.
also the time when the sky is being extremely divine and compassionate towards us. And sometimes they're also cruel, bring natural disasters.
Wow. So I love that you put like cleanse on a
Mm,
card that was
mm,
full of
mm.
these witchy angels. And wait,
Mm,
you know what else I find interesting is that during my Sophia journey, and I mentioned in my book, and what I learned was about the liar,
mm,
because there's the story of King David, who before he was a king, he was just a shepherd that would play the
mm.
lyre, and King
Yeah,
Saul
yeah,
would have him come and play
yeah.
it, and it would create like this. I think of it as some sort of field of energy that was protecting
Mm,
him and cleansing him and keeping him.
mm,
So I looked up what was up with the lyre, and it's like they mimic the solfeggio frequencies. Interesting. You find it in all history,
mm,
actually, even like
mm.
he had a lyre. I mean, there's a lot of this lyre stuff. I'm gonna get myself a lyre.
I have one actually. Yeah, I just need to learn how to
You
play them.
do?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, in the other room. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think
Wow.
when you like where you really feel very close to a divine figure, right? And I think it's
Mhm.
important that you also carry some of the things that they have, and so that you feel there's a connection.
Right.
You're literally building a
You're like
connection in a
embodying
3D
it.
world. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. So
Oh,
why do you have fire?
because lyre was one of the most important music instruments in Greek mythology, and it was owned by the god of the sun, Apollo. And also, it was a gift from
Mm.
Apollo to Orpheus. to appreciate
I
his
didn't
music
know
talent.
that.
Yeah, and so for example, in the in my
Right.
book Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, when you look at the chapter under the Heroes of Cancer, there's one chapter about Orpheus. He was, I
Okay.
would say, probably he was my favorite characters. Yeah, one of my favorite
Really?
characters in Greek mythology. Yeah, so I highly recommend that you read that chapter, and it's very very interesting. And again, we can apply that in our daily life. Yeah, in a very interesting way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
right. And of course everyone receives it probably exactly how they're supposed to. However
Mm,
it,
mm,
fits into their own life and their own situations. I love that
mm,
about these kind of
mm.
stories because what someone might, take from it, someone will take another part of it and go with it.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. I'm from Louisiana and we have Mardi Gras.
Mm,
And I don't live there now. I live in Colorado, but I did as a child. And they name all of the parades
mm.
after there's an Orpheus parade, there's a Toth parade, there's all of the like the gods. Like it's
Yeah, yeah, the Greek mythology figures, right? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, there's a Bacchus.
Mm.
Yeah. Those are all big parades.
Yeah, Bacchus
Yeah.
is Dionysus that you just talked about. It's the same guy.
It's the same guy.
Yeah, Bacchus is a Roman name. Dionysus is a Greek name, but it's the same god, the god of wine. Yeah. So
See, there's a lot of Catholics over there. They probably knew that.
yeah, so there's the two versions, right? So for example, Venus is Aphrodite, right? Aphrodite is Venus.
Right.
And depending on in
Right.
astrology, we use the Roman name more. So we will call the planet Venus, but the Greek counterpart is
Okay.
actually Aphrodite. Yeah. Yeah. So Bacchus and
Wow.
Dionysus, yeah, both of them are the same guy, same
Oh,
god,
that's so
named by
interesting.
two different cultures.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of power behind this stuff, and I do believe it's because it holds such ancient wisdom.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Naming children, yeah, things like that. I think, yeah, it's quite common. Yeah, even in let's say in Chinese culture, we do that too. And
You
because at
do?
the end, yeah, because at the end of the day, we all hope our ch children to be divine, and that's just a wish
Yeah.
from parents across the world. Nobody, if my child can be a god, why would I want my child to be a human? That kind of psychology, right? And even this is the same, again, in the mythological story about Achilles. In people lived thousands of years ago did the same thing. How come Achilles has the so-called Achilles heel, right? So his mother Thetis
Yeah.
was holding his heel and dipped him in the river Styx. And the problem is, and the reason was because his mother wanted him to be divine. His mother said, I'm not going to let
Mhm.
my son just to be immortal. He needs to be divine. That's why I'm going to
Right.
dip him in the river so that he will be invincible. Well, but the problem was his heel was not invincible. Yeah. So I think it's just a universal theme that we want our children to be divine. We want our children to be better than other children, whether we admit that or
Mhm.
not, right? Yeah. So when we name our children, we tend to, I think, put all these kind of beautiful things into it, right?
Well, I mean, you should do it
Mm,
with intentions, I think.
yeah. Yeah.
I want to ask you, you know how they say there's a little truth in every myth?
Mm.
You've heard this before. Do
Mm,
you believe that, besides, naming the stars, because they probably didn't have much to do but look at the stars back then, but do you
mm,
think that there's a little bit of history, that might be true? Sometimes they talk about real places, real rivers or well, when you think about when I compare like Sumerian Mesopotamian text to like
mm.
biblical text, I'm like, man, they're talking about the same similar stories, similar like rivers, the Euphrates River, real
Yeah,
places. So you
yeah.
wonder how much truth might be involved in some of the stories.
To be honest, nobody knows, right? But personally,
Right.
I believe that there's always some truth in it. And the reason that all the stories can be passed, generation after generation is because there's some truth in it. And yeah, and of
Yeah.
course, if we say,
Right.
okay, so where is the evidence of, I mean, we can always find small evidences here and there, but nothing can really prove that myths are real stories. I think probably myths were real stories, but exaggerated.
Yes. Like
Yeah.
the fish
So
stories, they get
yeah,
bigger and bigger and bigger.
yeah. Yeah, when I was in the traveling in Greece, I talked to just a local Greek guy. He was a bus driver, and he said, because on that day I wanted to see an ancient ruin, and we talked about Hercules, And I said, do Greek people actually think Hercules existed, back then, let's say thousands of years ago? And he said, well, I think there must have been a guy who was very Herculean, very strong, and maybe he did a lot of adventures, but his life was also difficult. There were a lot of challenges were imposed onto him, but not as magical as how the story was told, right? So it's interesting, even Greek people, they do believe that those figures existed, but just not
Mm.
as fabulous as what we read in the story. So,
Yeah, sounds like religion.
yeah.
Could be. You know what? And actually, these were religions, to
Mm,
these
mm.
people at
Oh,
one point. These
100%.
were
Yeah.
their gods.
Well, they're a pagan, right?
Yeah,
Pagan
yeah.
used to be a religion. I mean, it's very interesting because when I was in Rome, I visited the Pantheon, right? And the whole history about Pantheon was it used to be a pagan temple. So they nowadays you go in, it's all Jesus, right? That kind of things is very religious now, very Catholic now. But many years ago, originally the Pantheon was actually built for paganism because the whole concept of pantheon, pan means all, theon in Greek language means God. So pantheon means all gods. So there's not
There you
only
go.
one god, it's all the gods there, right? So we're talking about Apollo, Zeus, Hera, Hermes, all those
Yeah.
Greek gods, right? So I visited the Pantheon and I was actually the only thing you can see the ancient Greek mythology feeling there is the outward structure, right? The pillars and everything. But when you go inside now,
Yeah.
it's all Catholic, yes. Mm.
In Turkey, what's it called? There's the Library of Celsus. They have a Sophia that still stands in front. But like all of these goddesses that were on the front, there was also a virtue, right?
Mm,
There was like a wisdom, and then I
mm,
can't remember what the other one is. But same thing, very similar.
mm,
I mean,
mm.
these are archetypes that stand for good deeds or,
Yeah,
what you
yeah,
want to embody as
yeah.
a person.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I just
Mm,
find it to be so amazing. Like even like I think the other one was justice.
mm,
Yeah. So tell me how you did your cards because I was of course I'm a Taurus, so
mm,
I was
mm.
interested in looking at those cards. And how did you fit them in? And is it according to where they are in the sky?
So yeah, so the 36 stories that were assigned to one of the astrological decan. And so there are 12 zodiac signs in the sky, and each sign includes three decans there. And so each story will be with one decan, and that will that symbolizes one of the qualities of that sign. Yeah,
Okay, wow, that's
yeah.
so
Mm.
amazing. I mean, I'm just gonna learn so much. And I showed my kids, this is like the first deck. My kids were all like, wow, that is so cool. I mean, usually they're
Ah,
like, oh God, another deck, mom's right. But they were
interesting.
into it, and
Mm.
especially my boys, actually
Yeah,
even my daughter. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
these younger kids though,
Yeah.
so amazing.
You know what's interesting? I was actually in talking to another podcast. I think you know his name. His name is Paul Chek. He had this amazing podcast, and he told me, he said, actually, I'm asking my wife to read the stories to my children every night. He said this could be
Oh, I
actually a
could see
very,
that.
yeah, he said this could be a very good book even for teenagers because it's not like too philosophical, right? It's very easily understandable. And he said, this is
I
great,
agree.
for my children. And I said, wow, I didn't design this for children, but if children and youngsters can enjoy the book, why not? Right? I think this could be very helpful. Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, I feel like the book itself I would have
Mm,
just bought. The
mm,
cards is like double, triple bonus, and
uh-huh.
it's so
But
amazing. I was so excited.
y- y-
I
you
am
know,
so excited.
this is interesting, right? Because most Oracle decks, right, the books are very thin, and the authors usually don't write a lot because usually for Oracle decks they put a lot of attention onto the art, which is of course
Yeah.
important. But when I
Mhm.
was creating this deck with my publisher Beyond Words, we made it very clear that I want to write an amazing book for this deck. And so this is not just about, two, three sentences about a card and then, okay, that's it, and just look at the art. and interpret it by yourself. But it's more about I want people to really learn the mythological stories and read the case studies in the book as well, so that they can really apply this to their
So good.
life. Yeah. Mm.
It's so good. I mean, if you want to learn more about the different gods and goddesses
Mm.
and little did I know the also dark side of them.
Oh, everybody.
I just heard recently a different
Mm.
story about Medusa.
What did you hear?
Well, it was sad too. Like she was raped or something. And yeah, and I was like, oh, I never heard that. Of course, I just remember watching the movie when I
Mm.
was younger. Which movie
Mm.
was it? Oh my God, it was so scary. Where she like slithered out and she turned everyone into stone. Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah,
God.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I forget what movie that was. It was when I was like in elementary school or something. It was
Uh-huh,
terrifying.
uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah, there were a lot of stories about Medusa. Yeah, she's a very complicated figure because you can't really call her a monster. She's not really a monster because originally she was a priestess serving at Athena's temple. You know, she was pure, she was lovely, and she was a victim. She was a victim of a sexual assault, right? And the god of the ocean, Poseidon, raped her. Some people say he raped her. Some people say he seduced her, and she gave up. So she just did it with Poseidon. At the end, it was very interesting. You can see in the ancient days, it was women who was punished. So even though she was a victim, when
Yeah.
Athena found out that she's no longer a virgin, she didn't have an argument with Poseidon. She said it's your fault. You couldn't resist the Poseidon. You couldn't resist the seduction of Poseidon. So it's your fault. So I'm gonna turn you into this ugly
Mhm.
monster with snake hair. In a way, she was a victim. I think in mythology, when we look at Medusa, right, we also look at a lot of even in modern days. I actually have seen a lot of women who experience sexual assault. They will have a Medusa tattoo on their body because they feel they can really
Wow.
resonate with this character. And Medusa
I
was
didn't
really
know that.
yeah, and you can see Medusa, you can't look at her in her eyes because she will turn things into
Right.
stone, right? And in psychology, this is about our inner fear to deal with our history and to deal with our inner feelings. Even when you look at the
Wow.
English word, right, to be petrified originally actually means to be turned into stone.
Oh.
But now we actually see this word as to be terrified, right? I'm scared. You say I'm
Yeah.
petrified by something. So they're related. Being turned into stone means you are feared. You have fear, right? And so usually when we pull out this card, usually it needs us to really use a mirror to look at ourselves. And that's why the keyword for the card is reflection. When Medusa looks at herself, she will turn herself into stone. And that's how she destroys fear inside her. And but the problem is sometimes we're so afraid to look into the mirror. We are so afraid to look
Yeah.
at how we truly feel, right? So this is a very, very deep card, actually. A lot of
That's a very deep
astrologers,
card.
yeah, a lot of astrologers and historians have written a lot about Medusa. And of course, everyone has their own interpretation.
Mhm.
Some people might have more compassion for her because she was a victim. Some historians might see her in a different way and simply see her as the negative, the dark side, right, of our human psychology,
Yeah.
etc., etc. Yeah.
Wow.
For me, when I was writing this chapter, I wanted this Medusa to be an encouraging message for our audience. And I think that we all
Mhm.
have that dark side in us, but we can always use that shiny mirror to
Yeah.
reflect and to
Wow.
bring out, right, the pure, you know, who Medusa originally was, the pure
Wow.
um 15, 16-year-old girl who had a lot of faith in Athena, who served Athena as a priestess, right?
Athena kind of seems like a bitch now to me.
It's kind of, again, this you have to really read the entire history and the culture of ancient Greek and
Yes.
Greek
Right.
mythology. You will understand why, because it was a
Why?
very patriarchal society. If you read the stories, you will
Society.
find that actually most heroes from Greek mythology are men. There are very, very few
Yeah.
female
Right.
heroes per se. There was one whose name was
Right.
Atlanta, and that's just how the society worked at that time. But Athena actually, she was also, to be honest, if you read a story just about Athena, she was a very androgynous goddess. She's not really a
Mhm.
feminine, you know. First of all, she was
Oh.
born not from a sexual union between her parents. She born out of Zeus'
Yeah.
head. Zeus had headache
Right.
one
Yeah.
day, and Hephaestus opened Zeus' head, and here she is. She jumped out, not as a
I think
baby.
my dad thought that of me.
She never had a baby face, to be honest. She jumped out already
Oh.
in shiny armor as a grown woman. That's who she is. And so Athena was not really representing the feeling, the compassionate, the empathetic, the feminine, the warm,
Mm.
the nurturing side of us. Athena is always about the rationality, brain energy, the brainy energy. That's why she's a goddess of justice. When you look at the justice, you can't use compassion. Sometimes, yeah, people commit a crime because they were abused, but you can't say, okay, so you are free now because you were a victim as well. You still have to go to jail because you killed someone, right? And that's how justice system works. Justice is not about emotion and feelings. Justice is about fact. You did this, and this is a result. And so that's pretty much what Athena is. And that's why a lot of the stories, when Athena was dealing with mortal heroes, she tends to favor the male figures a lot because somehow in mythology, they connect the male figures with the divine masculine principles, which is about rationality and it's
Oh,
about
you're right. Yeah.
perseverance, right? And she relates much less with the feminine energy. Yeah, she's a very interesting goddess. Yeah, but actually, a lot of people love Athena because she tends to favor a lot of the male soldiers and heroes. Hercules,
Yeah.
Theseus. Yeah, they all received help from Athena.
Well, and
Mm.
she was also the Punisher to
Yeah. Oh,
Medusa,
yeah.
one that gave that justice,
Yeah. The
which is
card that
been
you
like,
actually showed earlier, right? The card Justice, and it was her with
yeah.
Orestes.
Oh, that
So
was
that's
her.
yeah, yeah. So Athena was pretty much like intervening the situation and saying, okay, now we need to bring justice to the situation. Okay, who is pardoned, who is not, So that chapter was also that's a long story actually. Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what?
So
I watched the other day, my oldest son, he suggested
mm,
that I watch Alexander the Great. It was
yeah.
on Netflix. Did you see it by chance?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. It was
Mm,
really
mm,
good. Yeah, I think he is a real person. He was a real
mm,
person.
mm,
But,
mm,
they kind of made him this god. And even some of the, stories that were told, you wonder, which were real and which
mm.
weren't. And Achilles,
Yeah.
so was he a real person? So you wonder, if some of these stories were just real people and like Alexander the Great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know
Mm.
what? I really enjoyed talking to you. I really enjoyed talking about this. Maybe we could redo this in like a year when I've learned about all of these gods and goddesses and we could totally geek out about it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I, I, I would love to
Mm,
because I mean, like I said, I'm just dipping my toe into this.
mm,
And
mm,
I have another, person two other people, I think, that just
mm,
contacted me. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to learn about mythology. I know for myself, learning about the Gnostic Gospels and all of the
mm,
ancient texts, to really look at these stories as allegorical
mm,
stories and like, what can they teach me? Like, why is this story still alive today?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. Tell everybody where they could find this. And do you do readings and stuff too? Because I know you're an
Yes.
astrologer. Yeah.
Yeah. So for a personal consultation to book a spiritual counseling session, they can find my information through my website, www.thehealingkingdom.com. And to purchase this Oracle deck, Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, they can find it on Amazon, Amazon.com, or on the publisher's website. Simply just Google the name, yeah, Oracle of the Mythic Heroes. On Google, you will find it, yeah, on online stores. Look forward to everyone enjoying the stories.
I think it's awesome. I think
Yeah.
that you could learn a whole lot, not just about these guys in here that are in girls, all of the heroes in here,
Yeah,
but about
yeah,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah.
So thanks so much for doing that. It's very unique and I love it. I appreciate
Thank
you
you.
coming on and sharing this with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. And I actually have another Oracle deck coming out in June. It's called Oracle of the Celestial Deities, right? So this one that you're having now, it's focused
Oh,
on the mortal stories, right? The heroes and heroines. The second deck coming is going to be focused on the god and goddesses. When that deck is coming out, yeah, maybe we can reconnect again. You can also already find this deck actually on Amazon. It's pre-order at this
okay.
moment. Yeah, you can have a look. I'm really proud of the artwork. for that deck. It's done by
Nice.
amazing
Ooh.
artist. Yeah, it's just beautiful. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, anytime. Yeah, I would love
Okay.
to reconnect. Yeah. Thank you so much for for showing your interest in my deck and in mythology. And I'm sure that we will have a lot more discussion about them. Yeah.
Yes, perfect. I will see you in the summer then.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a wonderful
Thank
day, yeah?
you.
Or a night for you. Okay.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Sense of Soul podcast. And thanks to our special guests for joining me. If you want more of Sense of Soul, check out my website at www.mysenseofsoul.com, where you can work with me one-on-one or help support Sense of Soul podcast by donating to my coffee fund. Thanks for listening.